Hello, everyone. Welcome to Subtle Asian Book Club. We're super excited to talk about the Atlas 6, which is our April book of the month. And we're super excited to have Olivie Blake as our guest. Some background for myself. I'm Alexandra at Twirling Pages with my co-host Tiffany at Read by Tiffany. And Olivie, would you like to introduce yourself and your book, as well as tell us your hobby or activity that you've been loving in 2022?
Oh, okay. So I'm Olivie Blake. I'm the author of The Atlas 6, which is an adult fantasy about 6 extraordinary magicians who compete for a spot in the Alexandrian society, the caretakers of lost knowledge, etc., etc. I think everyone here knows that already. Yeah, I'm at Olivie Blake on social media. I am a little bit frazzled, as I was telling my hosts. I have a clogged milk duct. So to any mothers in the audience, I have my haka attached to me right now, and I'm trying to solve that problem. So in case I say anything stupid, let's just blame it on, motherhood.
Blame it on the milk duct.
Yeah,
it's all good.
So in terms of hobbies, that's where I am. Does that count? Does breastfeeding count as a hobby? No.
Yeah.
It's not even a hobby. Being a mother is like a full-time job. It's more like being a full-time job.
It is, but don't ever let anyone tell you that being a novelist isn't glamorous.
What's something, I guess, like in similar vein, what's something that's like surprised you or something you like love the most that's happened the past year?
Oh gosh, well, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise to say that meeting people has been just so exciting. I think especially because a lot of the events that I have gone to have been people's either first ever book events or first since the pandemic started. So it's been really, I just love how many people have come up to me and been like nervous to talk to me because it's so crazy. I'm like just a normal person. I'm normally just sitting here behind my screen like everybody. And then for people to be like, to not know what to say or whatever, it's just been such a strange and wonderful and weird and amazing experience.
That's the glamorous author life.
Yeah, there's the glamorous author life, yeah.
So this is kind of a similar question because you kind of covered it, but we saw that on social media that you just wrapped up your UK tour, which is so exciting. Since you published the Atlas 6, like during the pandemic, what has been like super exciting about seeing fans in person in this case, or what's something like a question a fan asked you or something that's happened at an event that you were super stunned by or like you loved?
I mean, it's been people have found my work in such a variety of ways. There's been, I would say maybe like 4 different types of people that I've met. There's the people who have never heard of me and just went to the event because it was in a cool place. Because in the UK, it was in the London Library or at the Caves in Edinburgh. And they were both like just really awesome venues. So there were definitely lots of people who just showed up and knew nothing about me or the book. And then there's the people who picked up the book like after it's been traditionally published, weren't aware that it was self-published, like didn't really know anything about that, and then were kind of like shocked by the story. Then there's the people who started with the self-published version and read that first, then read the traditional version, or hadn't even yet, just were there because they had read the self-published one. And then there's the 4th kind, which are the people who have been reading my fan fiction since they were like teenagers or something, which that was definitely. Every interaction is memorable. One I loved, there was someone in Edinburgh who had never heard of me, never heard of my book, listened to me talk. And she was like, oh my gosh, the way you talk is so relatable. I too cannot finish my sentences. I have ADHD. And I was like, maybe I do too, I guess. That makes sense. But, and then, there were lots of people who, just told me that they had read my fanfic or however they found me. And it was just so, it really, I mean, because, the pandemic was going on tour after the pandemic is a big deal, but not really to me, because to me, I've always been just this random one person writing on my computer and not ever seeing my audience or not really being aware of anything that was going on. So it was just extraordinary and extraordinarily strange. Like that's just like, it's just so surreal to think that there are real people who have my books like actually physically in their house somewhere, I know that's so, it's so great. But yeah, So it's just been an incredible experience, and I am probably not done touring for the year because the second book comes out, so I still have to do like the East Coast and other. I'm maybe not supposed to talk about these things, so other places I'm supposed to go. So yeah, it just continues to be so crazy. Also, wow, this comment section really filled up.
Yeah. Yes, somebody said they're the fourth kind of reader.
Yeah.
Really exciting to see people who have like really been with you since the start of your writing journey, and now here you are on tour going to a bunch of places. I'm really excited. I hope you go to the East Coast, so I'm hopefully able to visit.
I'm really I go to
Yeah.
like all my publishers and my agent, they're all there, and I've never met them, and it just continues to be such a strange thing, elusive. Will I ever make it to New York?
Come to New York.
New York is like a must for you. I'm in Texas. I'm like, come to Texas.
I know that for the US leg of the tour, it was sort of limited because the pandemic was still like really, I mean, not that the pandemic has gone away in any sense, but it was like really bad when we were planning the March tour stop. So like at the time we were planning where I was going to go, we knew that New York was sort of like not going to happen because it was really strict. So yeah, we'll see what happens in October.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully everything goes well, and we'll have our East Coast tour. And yeah, very exciting. Transitioning more into the content of the Atlas 6.
Yeah.
Also, some context for everyone who's watching. We will be talking about spoilers, so if you haven't read the book, please leave. Anyway, the Atlas 6 reimagines a world where the Library of Alexandria burned itself down to protect its secrets. What inspired you to write this story, and who are some of your literary inspirations?
So, I mean, the short part of it is that if I were a caretaker of the Library of Alexandria and I was like, you know what, I think Caesar might not be cool with us. Like in a way that I think librarians now are sort of sensing like, like someone in charge might be up to some shenanigans. Like I would pull the Sherlock, which is exactly what I wrote into the book. To me, it was just like I wanted to write a world where there was sort of this concept of unlimited knowledge. I wanted to focus on what kind of archives would we have if there had never been imperialism, essentially, like if there had never been knowledge that was like stolen and we just got to keep progressing and keep moving forward instead of having, a dark ages every now and then. And just to me, like, I know that ultimately it became sort of a sexy sell of this book, like, ooh, the Library of Alexandria. Whereas to me, I was just like, well, this is the thing that makes the most sense, that if we start with this very famous library and then sort of add in this idea that like, well, what if every library just sort of like joined together and we had this growing archive, then maybe where could we be in terms of both, academic knowledge and magic, which is what the world is built on. So it was just sort of a mechanism for that. And then what was the second part of the question? The literary.
Yeah, who are your literary inspirations?
So to me, this book is really like, this book would not exist without The Secret History. The Secret History is like, the inceptor or whatever of dark academia. It's the what everything is based on, and it gives the flavor of like psychological thrilleriness. And I think it's more because to me there's like sort of branches of dark academia in the sense that like that is more like action. That's like there's more sort of louder. I guess not different kinds, but like volumes. And for me, the Atlas 6 is like a lower volume, like the same way The Secret History is, that we're just going to be sort of quiet and go into these digressions and just live in these characters' heads for a while and experience this, not in the sense that like things are happening. We're not like fighting demons. We are literally wrestling with what does it mean to behave ethically? What does it mean to how do these science concepts work? So that's certainly a reference. You know, If We Were Villains is kind of the same way, where you kind of just like glory in the content. Like, I really like when dark academia is sort of in love with its own art. Which I think is the case with the Atlas Six, that I was just very into the science I was talking about, or really into this, like, the definition of beauty. And so it is sort of self-indulgent that way. And that is the kind of dark academia I prefer. I also like, what do I always call out? I like things that are a little bit weird also. So I like Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas, and Bunny by Mona Awad. But both of those things were things I read after. So they're not really influences, but they're like in line with the sort of thing that I enjoy.
Ooh. You're saying it's self-indulgent for you. I was like, well, it's self-indulgent for us as the readers.
But I think, I mean, the thing that I always am coming back to is I initially wrote this story for myself. And so I know that it obviously does appeal to a lot of people, but it like has to find its audience. You know what I mean? It has to be with the kind of people who want the self-indulgent, that like, we're here for vibes. We're here to kind of, the pace slows down every now and then to like really explore what the characters are thinking and feeling. And yeah, it just feels so miraculous that this book found its audience, or that its audience is so large. And that it found it to begin with, because I wrote it just because I could, because no one was going to stop me.
Yes, and we're so glad that you wrote it. Personally, I am someone who like loves books that has like really character driven and very good ambiance. And so reading the Atlas Six was really like a treat. And I was like, oh, I just want to be here. We don't have to do anything, but I just want to be here. But of course, a lot of things happen.
Well, thank you. Yes.
So the magic system is very closely intertwined with science. We walk through worlds, we create wormholes, communicate with plants, etc. So what was the research process like when you crafted this world?
The research process was also very self-indulgent. It was very much, so my husband is a physics teacher, and it's kind of, you know, half my library is science related because they're his books. And so at some point when I was kind of toying with the idea of what if we built the magic system sort of like the theoretical physics concepts, and he was like, here's a pile of books, try these. He gave me a lot. I mainly use Carlo Rovelli's work and theories about like quantum gravity and time. And that was kind of where I started. And then as I was writing, I always talk from a craft perspective. I don't do a lot of pre-research. I sort of troubleshoot as I go. I have like just enough where I have an idea of what I want to write. The setting is kind of like not necessarily clear, but I know where I'm going, sort of. And then I basically just write a few feet ahead of me, if that makes sense, you know, and just leave notes to myself, like, add something in here later. Like if you're going to specify something, do it here. And then in the moments where I really want to go a particular direction, I kind of essentially let myself fall down a little bit of a research hole, read things, follow their like the references, the index and the stuff that's in the back of the book, you know, the for further reading type of things. I'm really hoping that at the end of book 3, I can do like an academic index of all the stuff that I read for the series. I am truly, again with the self-indulgence, but I really, to me, the Atlas Six is true academia, that it's like I just enjoy the process of trying to research and coming up with these things. And I am hoping that we can stick with the vibes and actually give a list of all the things as if it was a dissertation or something.
Oh,
but dissertation on human nature, I suppose. But yeah, so, but it was definitely like, oh, this concept is kind of interesting, I'm going to include it. I had a really good question when I was on tour that someone asked, like, how did you decide what to put in? And the answer is I put everything in. Like, you know, it's hard not to be aware of criticism, right? And so I know one of the things that people didn't like is the pacing. And that's because I paused to just be like, but what about this interesting thing that I just read that I'm now going to put in this book that I'm writing? So yeah, so to me, I can't help but be thrilled with myself.
But we're here for the vibes and we love it. And I see a bunch of comments of people saying yes to the academic index. And I'm honestly here for it. I would be super excited if I could see an academic index at the end of the series and then actually go back and like further readings. That'd be so fun.
Yeah, I think it would be a fun project. We'll see. I certainly, if it's not included in the book, can also release it anywhere into the interwebs. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about, but I'm obviously still researching, and I guess technically some things would be spoilers, but
I mean, we're fine with that.
I know.
Book 2 is very psychology based. It's really based in the concept of like ego, fate, as in the collective blueprint, the idea of like, is there an atavistic human consciousness? So yeah, here's your little spoiler for book 2.
Yay! Oh my gosh, now I'm even more excited. I was already excited, even more excited.
I was like, this sounds so good, but I'm like not big brain enough to figure out what this means actually.
That's just how that's more of a like underlayer of how I conceived of it. It's not really any plot spoiler.
Makes sense. You mentioned earlier about the journey of fanfiction writing into self-publishing and then it being acquired. So it was originally self-published in January 2022 before Tor preempted the series and Tor UK won the series at auction. What has this journey been like for you from a writing standpoint? Do you remember changing any pieces of the narrative? And do you still see yourself self-publishing and writing fanfiction in the future?
So I'm going to answer these backwards. So yes, I always wanted to traditionally publish, but I always split myself into things that I was writing for self-publishing because I knew it had an audience, but that audience probably wasn't like the larger market. And then the things that I thought were sort of more commercially viable. And so I sense that there will still be stories I want to tell that are not appropriate for not appropriate, but not right for traditional publishing. So like Alone with You in the Ether, I'm not really interested in traditionally publishing it because it's very personal. It's kind of written exactly the way I wanted it to be written. That's my story. That's like a literary romance, and it's about mental health and it's about my experience with mental illness. So that's not something where I'd want to do a lot of work. And, not every standalone that I've written, I'd want to be traditionally published, stuff like that. So yes, there may be things that I still self-publish. I might still write fan fiction. I still use, I think the last one I wrote was a little like Rebecca fic-lit. And then I wrote like some supernatural Jane Austen. I just don't engage with the source material I used to. And that's a separate decision that has nothing to do with this success. That's sort of unrelated, but happens to coincide with this timing. But as for this process, it was really strange. What I really wanted initially when I wrote this was I wrote this at a time when I was really frustrated with the traditionally publishing process. Cold querying wasn't going well. I mean, anyone who's querying can relate. It is very difficult and it's frustrating. And it was especially frustrating from like a marginalized perspective. I got a lot of comments that was like, I can't relate to this. This doesn't like speak to me personally. And it's like, well, I'm not trying to speak to you. I just have to get through you to speak to the people I want to speak to. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to write this story. It's going to be quiet. It's going to be weird and unconventional. It's going to be, every character is going to be like 100% sexually fluid. No one can stop me. I'm not even going to worry about anyone else's opinions. Yeah. And so put that out into the world. And I always knew that I wanted it to be a trilogy just because I knew it was going to be a longer story. a lot of my fan fictions actually are quite long. So this was one of those where I had the sense like this is going to be a longer story, and to be book length, it would have to be probably 3 books. And so I released this book, and then I got an agent for my young adult, My Mechanical Romance, which is coming out in May. And then I thought, well, I guess this is my job now. You know, like I guess I failed as a science fiction and fantasy writer, and now I'm a young adult romance writer, and maybe that's going to be my focus for a while. So I figured like, not that many people have read the Atlas 6. Maybe I'll like, you know, take a year to just work on My Mechanical Romance, and then I'll get back to it, and I'll release it as soon as like I've met my publisher requirements for that book. And then, yeah, I don't know, something crazy happened. And the book got into the hands of a lot more people. And then at that point, when I realized like, oh, more people are going to want the next book, and like maybe it's a little bit more urgent than it was before, I started talking to my agent like, you know, it's really important to me that I finish this series. I have to finish this trilogy. I don't know what it's going to take to do it, but I have to do it. So like, do you think there's a chance that we could get a traditional publisher? Like this is one where this project, it would be important to have someone else sign on, because there were people asking for audiobooks, people asking for hardcovers, and then, you know, pressure for the sequel. And it was just like, this is too much for me to handle by myself. I can't produce my own audiobook. I don't know how to get this book into the like different international markets. Like this, like a publisher has to take it from here. So got very lucky with Tor, because it's just like, it was a real meeting of the minds, like really good situation. I've seen people say like, oh, this book is revised by Tor, but no, the book is revised by me with Tor's oversight. I had an amazing team, amazing editorial team, and I really got the chance to like flesh out a lot of what I wasn't able to do when it was just a side project. So it was kind of like, oh, we can live in these emotional beats for a little bit longer. We can kind of reconceive of certain scenes. So narratively, nothing changed. A little bit, the order of events kind of changed, and what each character knows going into the sequel is slightly different. So I tell people who have only read the self-published version that if you can, try to read at least part 8 from the new version. Like there are other changes. It would be cool if you could read the new version in its entirety. I added 1 or 2 physical descriptions. But if you can't, then just read part 8, because that part has changed. But yeah, it was mostly about me like getting the chance to make sure I was telling the story that I wanted to tell. And but it was actually quite hard, because I was trying to fit I think it was November 2021, fit that voice into the January 2020 voice, which was pretty hard, because it's just like, you know, as a writer, naturally your style changes a little bit, it advances a little bit. So I was trying to fit my current self back into my past self, and actually writing the sequels was much easier and much faster to do, because it was like, oh good, you can just use my voice now. So yeah, that was a lot. I just threw a lot of information at you, but
no, it's all very, very, very interesting. But yeah, thank you for sharing.
I was just like, wow, you can just listen to you talk forever.
No, seriously.
It was such an interesting process, and there's so much I could say from a variety of like, just from a self-publishing and traditionally publishing point of view and craft point of view. There's so much interesting about what happened with this book, and it's like I could pick any subject and talk about it forever. But yeah, it definitely just in terms of this series, it's just been really exciting to have the book of my mind become the book of many minds. I think that's really made it better all around, and I'm just so excited about where it's going, because I feel like I'm really getting to tell the story I wanted to tell with all the resources to do it in such an amazing way. The audiobook is amazing, the hardcovers look fantastic, like so yeah, it's really a dream.
This is kind of like a maybe you don't know yet, but do you feel like you'll still keep writing like sci-fi or fantasy, even though you earlier said like, oh, maybe like now you're a young adult since this is getting picked back up?
Oh no, I have like the best career ever because I essentially have 2 careers now. So Olivie Blake gets to keep writing fantasy, which is fantastic. Like I'm already talking with my editor about what we're going to do after the Atlas 6. Yeah, so it's like it's really really exciting. The last thing I pitched was sort as an idea that's sort of like the Royal Tenenbaums, where it's like people who used to be prodigies that are like mentally ill now. But with magic. And then Alexine, my actual self, allegedly, gets to keep writing rom-coms. So I get to have these sort of 2 completely different careers. And then if I chose to continue trying to do like, I have every now and then I have sort of a one-off project like Alone with You in the Ether, or I was writing another sort of literary concept called Stargazing is Necrophilia. That's something I could self-publish because it doesn't really fit into other categories. But yeah, so I basically have lucked into this incredible situation where I can write most things I want, and I probably will because I get bored really easily.
Woo, we love that. So
Yeah.
moving a little bit into plot and character questions and away from the research and writing questions,
Mhm.
The Atlas 6 is a very character-driven book, as we mentioned before, with an all-star cast. Who is your favorite character to write and who was the most challenging?
So I don't have a favorite character. And I try very hard not to have a favorite character because I think that when the author has a favorite character, you can feel their energy change. Like I really think that when you're reading a book and the author's favorite character comes on the page, you're like, oh, the author's more excited now. And I try to avoid that happening. The way that I wrote this was kind of like, it was kind of, I would just pick a starting point and sort of that character would necessitate an equal and opposite character, and then we'd go to them. I always, especially on tour, have always brought up the book If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha, which is completely unlike the Atlas 6, except that it has multiple points of view and you kind of learn new things from visiting the next point of view, where it's like you'll be in one person's personality and in their thoughts, and you'll think one thing about what's happening, and then you'll see it from another perspective and realize that you were not given the objective truth. You were just given like you can see the shape of it from being around the outside, which that's what I'm essentially doing or trying to do with the Atlas 6. It's like we've got these 6 completely unreliable narrators who are each their own hero or villain. They're each their own hero and someone else's villain, essentially. And that none of them are telling you the whole truth. So you have to decide what the truth is because it's not actually on the page. Which was that was what I wanted to like experiment with, like this idea that you'd be in one person's head and then think like, who haven't we heard from? Or like, who would make this perspective feel like richer, like more of a meal? And then that person would be next. So the ideal situation for me is that you're reading one character's point of view and then you're like, what's this character been up to? And then they're next. That's the like progression that hopefully you go through. Hopefully. But yeah. But was anyone more challenging? I don't think so. Certainly there were some days that the way that I write books is I'm sort of a reformed pantser. So for anyone who wants a little craft talk, here's my little craft talk for you. The way that I write books is I just write for the first like 25 to 30,000 words, I would say. I just write whatever I want to. And then at that point, I force myself to stop and do a pretty skeletal outline so that I have an idea of where, because that's essentially Act 1. And then I have sort of an idea from that point, where is Act 2, where is Act 3? So I don't necessarily know the ending. I don't necessarily know the plot points, but I have an idea of when like beats have to occur. And so I think that at around the 30,000 mark of the Atlas 6, we have heard from each character. And then at that point, I was starting to like, okay, now I know what each one sounds like. So now let's figure out how to make, how we can move things forward. So one example I use is that the scene between Callum and Parisa might make you could write that a few different ways. And most notably, it could have been written from Parissa's perspective. But I didn't necessarily want you to know Parissa's truths yet. I just wanted you to see the mechanisms of how their minds were changing. So I wrote it from Callum's. So things like that. So it wasn't necessarily yeah. So I'm not answering the question. So it wasn't necessarily more difficult to write any particular character, but to give the narrative shape by using the character was very strategic.
That's super, super interesting. I really, really enjoyed listening to that.
Hey.
Yeah. But moving on to the next question, the magic system in the Atlas 6 is very unique to each character. Did you always know this, or did you always know what each character's magic would be, or was it something that came over time as you got to know your characters?
It was built into the way that I envisioned them, like because essentially their specialties are also it's their strength, but it's also their blind spot. So it's the way that they see the world, but it's also the way that they can't necessarily understand the other specialties because they're so like rooted in the way that they do their magic. I don't have a very good memory of like how I came up with them. I think they just like, that was just part of them. Like, and there wasn't a point where I was like, oh, we have Callum and now he's an empath. You know, he just always was all of those things. Fleshing out their backstories was something that was important and also related to their specialty, related to the way they saw the world. But it's all kind of like, it's that like eternal nature versus nurture thing, which is also true in writing. Which came first? I don't know. But yeah, did I miss a part of that question? I don't know. Sorry.
No. I think you covered it. It makes sense because the character kind of how I'm imagining it is like clay or pottery. You're like building it, and that's like all part of it. But
Yeah.
more of like a fun question: if you could spend a day with any of your characters, who would it be and why? And also, would the magic affect that choice?
I mean, for me, I always lean towards Callum or Parissa. I really feel like that would be the most entertaining for me. But that's because people often ask me what my specialty would be or what I would want it to be. And my answer is telepathy because I'm just very, very nosy. I really would love, like, I really think that I would have a great time just like sitting on a bench and people watching with either Callum or Parissa. I think this is just what I do anyway. My mom and I used to like sort of pick out strangers and make up stories about them, you know, and like, wouldn't that be so much more fun if the person next to you could be like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. Like, I remember one time my mom and I think there was someone at the airport and we'd made up some story about how they were like a spy, but they were also having an affair. And so there was like something that was related to the marital indiscretion, but also related to the spy thing. And like, how fun would it be if Callum was like, it's true. All of that is true.
Yes. And you're missing this other thing that they're an assassin as well.
I think I just am fundamentally interested in people, which ironically is Callum and Parissa are uninterested in people, so they would not like having to do this with me. But no one asked what they thought. You asked what I thought, so congratulations to me.
Callum just like gets all of these feelings from other people, but hates it himself.
Yeah, he would not be happy that this was my choice of activity. But this is what I would do. I would take Callum to a club. Someone asked me what all the characters would be doing at the club or something. And I felt this was a good question because I do think that Callum and Parissa would be doing exactly what I was saying. I also would like to confirm that Nico would be dancing.
Oh, Nico. That is kind of a segue into the next question, but even though the Atlas 6 isn't a romance fantasy, the ships are endless, like people are very invested in them. Personally, I am on the Nico Olivie Nation. Can you tell us a little bit more about creating the relationship dynamics between the characters, and was there a particular reason why you kept the romances in the story more fluid?
I just really wanted, well, first of all, I kind of wanted to create a true situation of like, if you had a bunch of 20 somethings in a house together, just having to study all the time, there's all these books, like, I don't think that they would pair off immediately. You know, I think there would be like a lot of, we would just vibe with like a lot of different people. And I think part of it is that the age that they are. So Nico and Libby are the youngest. Tristan and Raina are in their mid 20s, and Callum and Paris are in their late 20s. And I just really wanted to have, you know, this is very vibe related, that I just wanted the vibes that they could really kiss each other or kill each other at any given moment, and you just wouldn't really know for sure. And it felt like the truest to academia for me. Like that's my experience with being in grad school and in law school. Just this sense of like you're around these people all the time, and there's some sort of weird dark magic when you're studying for finals, you know, and all of a sudden you're like, that guy's kind of hot actually. Like I've never thought of that before, but I could be down. and yeah, but also it was, I always knew it was book one. I always knew we were going to be on sort of a long journey, and I do get bored. So I didn't want necessarily to establish anything that would then be like upended in later books. You know, I sort of was hoping for longer arcs than that. And I really also wanted to, I didn't want to just do uncomplicated romance. I wanted to do different shades of romance and different shades of relationships. I think that like there are a lot of different kinds of love stories, and I think that this is in equal parts a very strange love story between 6 people, but also kind of a weird family drama at the same time, you know? And I didn't want to force myself to decide. So actually when I wrote book 1, I did not know who was going to end up with who. I did not know in book 2 either. I know now what's happening, but I wouldn't say that it's like so uncomplicated. Like you're not looking at a, we're not ending in a wedding, you know? So like there's still like textures of difficulty. And I think that there is love, and a complex, convoluted love between every single one of these characters.
That makes so much sense, because I think like as a reader, you're like, I just want to know who gets together like right away. But then
I mean, that's like, I look for romance too, but I also wanted this to be I wanted to write for the audience who is interested in romance, but is also kind of along for the ride. And so like that we're seeing the way, the different shapes that romance can take. And it was sort of my opportunity to do that in a very fluid way, because it's already kind of a fluid world. The like morality is so fluid that I didn't have to make decisions right away about who's going to end up with who, you know, and especially because they're in their 20s, it didn't seem right to focus on it immediately. But yeah, I was going to say something about, no, never mind. Keep going. If I remember, I'll bring it up.
It's like in The Bachelor, you don't know who ends up with who right away.
We have to figure out how we get there. I compare this book to The Bachelor all the time. It kind of is. Like, you know, just with books and science.
And murder, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I can't rule that out about The Bachelor, but not yet. It hasn't happened yet.
That's true. Yeah, when you're explaining it, I was like, this makes perfect sense now, because like you said, like the world is really fluid. The characters and their magic is very fluid. Like morality is very fluid. And I think it's also just really refreshing as a reader to read a story where the romance isn't so obvious right away, where it's like more for someone who is like, oh, I just want to read, and if there's romance, that's nice, but if there's none, that's also fine. As opposed to like sometimes when I read books, it's just like a different experience. But sometimes when I read books, it's like, oh yeah, it's really obvious. Like these 2 people will end up together. And then there's the journey of how they will end up together. But now you're like, what will happen? Anything could happen. Literally anything could happen.
And the how do characters end up together is a very, very interesting psychological study to me. I approach my romances like thrillers. Like I think of them the same way. in terms of construction. But this book for me wasn't that. This book was let's see, because for me there are, you know, the standard romance between two people. That's not this book. This really is about the relationship between 6 people. Oh, I remembered what I was going to say. My editor at Tor, when we were starting to do the revisions, they were like, can you send me like just a little a brief like paragraph about which characters, like what their relationships are, like explain the ships to me. And instead I sent her a matrix of every character vertically and every character vertically, horizontally, XY axis, and then like, yeah, and how they were related, and like from each character's point of view. And she was like, oh, okay, forget I asked. So yeah.
As a reader, I want to see this matrix. I'm so invested.
Yeah, we'll see. I think at the end of this trilogy, I'll go back through and see what's actually interesting. I mean, at the time when I wrote this little matrix, there's question marks in it. There's like, I don't know what's endgame here, but this is what I'm working with. So yeah, it would be interesting to look at. We'll see.
Yes, have it along with the academic index at the end.
Yeah.
Very exciting. You mentioned earlier that you always intended the series to be a trilogy, but did you always have the ending of the trilogy already in mind when you were writing it initially, or did you always anticipate that character to have a history with Atlas?
Yeah, so no, I will start with that. So since you've already warned everybody about spoilers, that character, I was writing the interlude and I knew that it was Ezra talking and I knew that he was on drugs. I just sort of wrote I wrote this rambling speech about how to starve and what it means to starve. And this was like something that I was thinking about. They were just like thoughts I was having. They were not related to anything in the plot. And I was just writing it. And then Atlas answered and I was like, oh, fuck. Oh my God, it's you. Okay. And then, yeah. So I knew certain things. I knew what Ezra's specialty was. I knew that like time was going to be an element. But that's it. I knew nothing about book 2. No knowledge. The only reason I knew it was going to be a trilogy was because I knew there was the first year with the elimination requirement, the second year, and then where we sort of zoomed out a little bit to see a little bit more of the world. And then the third year when they're like actually out in the world and stakes are very high. And the third book is definitely going to be the most action-y book. So that was something that I always, yeah, if action is your thing. So that was always I guess the zoom was what I always knew was going to happen, but the details, I didn't know any of that. Like I said, I get bored very easily. So if I know too much, then I don't find it interesting to write anymore. So yeah, but now I know how things end, which is good because I think that book 3 has to be completely written and edited by November. So come November, that's a crazy thought that like in a few months I'm going to have all of this done.
When is book 3 supposed to come out?
I think summer 2023, definitely 2023. So you won't have too long to wait, and I think it will be less than a year's wait. But yeah, don't quote me on that.
Oh
in the meantime,
I'm so excited.
What can fans expect in the Atlas Paradox, which is coming out this October? And what were you as a writer most excited to explore in the sequel?
So I was terrified to write book 2. There were a lot of things going on. One, I had in between the Atlas 6 and having to write book 2, I had my baby and I became very stupid. Like mom brain is a seriously real thing. I used to be able to finish my sentences and now I'm constantly losing my train of thought and I've lost my ability to multitask. It was a whole thing where I was like, I actually don't know. My brain is not the same. I can feel that my brain is not the same. And I was worried, how am I supposed to dive back into this trilogy? How am I supposed, especially like, and the stakes are even higher now. So before it was going to be like 10 people who wanted the next book. And now it's a lot more than that. And how do I not disappoint them? And so the way for me to do that, to face the anxiety and the imposter syndrome, like seriously, I believe I'm getting away with a con. But So dealing with that was just like, you know what, I'm just going to sit down, I'm going to write it, we're going to see what happens. And I have to tell you that I really like book 2. I think that it's very much, if you enjoy book 1, you're getting basically the same thing. Like, I don't think anyone is going to be like surprised by the way that book 2 goes. It's almost exactly the same structure. And it's still like, we've zoomed out a little bit in the world, but we're also still, we're still experiencing that sort of weird fluid space time where like the characters are, they're really buried in their books and their thought exercises, and they're kind of losing their minds a little bit, and they've been in this house for a little too long, and now they have to exist with like 2 people in the house tried to kill each other, and now they have to be roommates. Like, it's so it's just it's, I think if you are an enjoyer of headspace, you know, and like and seeing what a character is going through and how they get from point A to point B, it will be very interesting to you. I am told by the few people who have read it, which is like, you know, Lilith Mora, my illustrator, my husband, my editor, that book 2 is better than book 1. So yay. But yes, but I was really, really scared. I was honestly just scared that you know, how do you write a sequel? It's such a, like, I hadn't really done it before. Sequels are never as good as the original. And especially book 2 in a trilogy, you kind of always know what you're getting, right? Book 2 is always just a bridge. But I'm actually really happy with this bridge.
Yeah, and you did it.
I did it.
Congrats.
Yeah, it was sort of a miracle that it happened at all. But no, but I'm really happy with it. And also, my editor is really signed on to like the vibes, which, so there's, you know, so in this book there's like front matter, which I don't really want to explain because I don't want to spoil it, but just know that we've got like everyone is in on the vibes, and it's just, yeah, it'll all come together. The aesthetic is very good. This is like the Tumblr generation wrote a book.
Oh
Yes,
my god.
we are the Tumblr generation. We're here
Literally.
for it.
Literally very here for it. Very, very excited.
I already have my pre-ordered copy from Barnes & Noble's from
Oh,
the sale that
yes.
was going on.
Yes, I'm super, super, super excited. But in the meantime, your latest YA contemporary My Mechanical Romance will be releasing next month on May 31st. Congratulations.
Thank
Can
you.
you tell us a little bit more about it?
So My Mechanical Romance is basically about, let's see, how do I want to start this? There's so much like emotionally in this book for me, because it's essentially about women of color in STEM, and the idea that like there are a lot of us, I'm going to say us, who get pushed out of STEM from an early age, you know, because it's, one story I always come back to, the reason I wrote this book was because I wrote a short story about 2 engineers falling in love, and there was a very sort of surprising reaction to it. There were people, women who were in STEM, who were like, I've never seen my story like romanticized like this. You know, no one thinks of my life as sexy. No one's made my life sexy before. And like, this is the first time I feel like I've been seen in a romance. And then there were also people who were like, it was really interesting to see, you know, a female main character who was an engineer, and sort of the little glimpses of like microaggressions that she faced. And one story that sticks out to me a lot was someone was saying that when they were in high school, I think they were really interested in joining like their robotics club. But when they got there, it was all boys, and all the boys had taken up like the front rows, and she couldn't like, she couldn't see. So she couldn't see what the assignment was. She couldn't see the board. And like, it was just all this little, like, there just wasn't space made for her, you know? And so she just never went back, and she didn't go into robotics, and she's not an engineer. And I think the same thing happened to me. Like, we receive all this messaging as girls that's like, you're not supposed to like math and science, or if you don't like it, that's normal. Don't worry about it. It's for boys anyway. Like, boys are more interested in it. And it's funny because when I was in high school, there was one time with like a history teacher, and I felt that I should have been recognized, and I went into like marched in after class, and I was like, you should include me. I'm good enough for this. I'm smart enough for this. But then when it came to math, they were like, you know, no one tried to make me do better, and I didn't know to advocate for myself, because I just kept receiving the message that, like, if you're not good at this, that's fine. You're not supposed to be good at this. You don't have to be good at this. And so I kind of wanted to imagine a world where a girl who was very artsy, but maybe a little uninspired or unmotivated, like, realized that no, there is no such thing as your interest being mainly for boys, or that this thing is for boys. But I also, there were two, I wanted to approach, sorry, I know I've been talking forever. It's
No,
just,
keep going. We're here for it.
Yeah. Because, yeah, like I said, my husband is a physics teacher, and it's just like every day he's confirming this for me, that the girls in his class that are really smart, they don't see themselves as smart, or they don't really understand that how well they're doing, you know, because on their own metric, they're not succeeding. They're comparing themselves to, like, the boys who are very, like, gregarious about their success in science, or how they want to be engineers, and the girls they can't, like, envision a place for themselves. So I wanted to talk about the very real microaggressions, like what actually does happen if you try to be a woman in STEM. You are going to have your competency questioned. There are going to be people who are in the room watching you, waiting for you to fail. And that is hard. And the truth is that it's hard, and it takes a certain type of strength. And not everyone wants to be tough like that. You know, it shouldn't be a requirement to be just outwardly strong in that, you know, in the way that where you deflect things. It should be a space that's open to everyone because they love it, because it's so hard to find passion that if you find it, you shouldn't be worried about deflecting other people's opinions to have it. So it was kind of this two-part of, like, I want to show what's real, but also I want to show that we are better off if we diversify, you know, our interests. That the world will be better off if women of color, people of color, and women, and all the marginalized, all the groups who haven't gotten a seat at the table get that seat now. And that's how we'll see change, and that's how we'll see improvements, and there is hope, and people's minds can be changed. And it was really best to do that in the YA space, because I could kind of make that stretch. It's just like, this is what it could look like. So unlike the Atlas 6, which is like, we're already affected by institutional rot, like, this is what it is. We're already laboring under capitalism.
Super, super, super exciting.
That was like a full-on speech.
No, I'm here for it. I was like, wow. I don't even know how to follow up on that, because I'm just so inspired right now.
I also need to practice pitching that. So I've had a lot more practice talking about the Atlas 6, and that one I'm just like, here are all my emotions. I haven't figured it out yet. I'll tighten that up.
We love it.
Great.
Yeah, somebody said. And same. Literally same.
It's very reassuring.
So, well, actually, okay, I was going to jump into the next question, but I'm, like, very curious. I think I read in your bio that you went to law school and you, like, dropped out of law school, if I remember correctly. Have you ever envisioned, like, framing this story, like, in, like, the law space, or, like, having a book written about, like, a female lawyer or anything like that?
I haven't, because to me it feels like ground that's been covered, but probably not in the same way that I would cover it. You know, I think that the way I always describe it is, like, so I have an immigrant parent, which means that there was, like, one path for me, right? Law. Like, maybe if I were good at math, then I would have been a doctor. I would have gone to med school, but I wasn't. So I was good at books and law school. And it really seemed like those were my options. And so maybe we haven't seen it approached that way. But yeah, it for me, it just felt like sort of well-trod ground. Because, I mean, how many rom-com heroines are lawyers, you know? But
So true, so true. So, in other exciting news, the Atlas 6 is also being adapted by Amazon into a TV series. What are you looking forward to the most when it comes to seeing your story come to life?
Oh my God, I'm so excited. I know. So my thought on adaptations is that they just have to get, like, the soul and the textures right. You know, like, if they embellish a little with the actual story, that's fine, as long as they're getting at, like, the heart of it. Like, I just started watching Pachinko, which, like, I loved the book, and I haven't gotten that far in the show, but I loved the choices they made. Like, that intro was so strong to do the, like, past and present at the same time. So that's the kind of thing I mean, that, like, to me, film, TV, it's a different art form. So I'm looking forward to seeing something that's both new and old, you know, something that really embraces what I was trying to do and the types of like the themes that I was going for. One of the questions I loved that my producers asked me was, they were like, so how do we want the sex scenes to look? Like, what do we want that, like, how explicit do we want them to be? How are we trying to portray sex on screen? Which is a fascinating question, right? Because obviously female gaze, definitely. But also, I personally think that the most sensual scenes in the book, like the ones that are the most romantic, that have the most tension, are not actually sex. Like the sex scenes are about power. And then the tension scenes, it's the will they, won't they. So yeah, so I was like, I really want I want that sensuality. And then I also want the clarity that like the sexual politics, you know. So we'll see how that gets presented. But I really think that I've got really good collaborators and I just can't wait to see it. Yeah, just all of it.
So excited. Do you have like any information about it? Like when it might be released, cast list release?
I don't have anything for sure. I have a sense that the series will probably, the trilogy, since it's happening so quickly, will probably be concluded before we see the show, but I don't know that for sure. So yeah. But we are not casting. I'm getting a lot of messages that are like, I can't find the casting director. It's like, because there isn't one. I'm sure there will be a call. We're working on finding the right showrunner right now. So I'm not writing, I'm just executive producing. I felt like, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. We need to get someone who actually knows how to make a TV show.
Yeah, very, very exciting. Okay, last question related to the Atlas 6. What is one of your favorite quotes from the book? There were so many amazing lines, so we really were curious about what was your favorite.
Actually, the knowledge is carnage line is one of my favorites. It's hard for me to remember now because my brain is really an Atlas paradox. Like there are so many lines from that book. To me, the Atlas paradox is funnier. I like let myself tell jokes or to myself. I did things that I thought were funny. So it's a little bit of a dark humor. But yeah, the knowledge is carnage line is the one that I would have pulled out if they hadn't already done it for the title. But the tagline on the Atlas Paradox, the destiny is a choice, I did pick that one out. So when you get there in context, you'll have to let me know.
Oh, we're so excited.
Yes.
So moving into some like fun questions that are not Atlas 6. Actually, there is one technically. But what is a book in 2022 or 2023 that you're really looking forward to?
I just finished an early read of Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh, which I think comes out April 2023, and it's fantastic. If you've ever looked at the world and been like, everything freaking sucks, that book will change you for the better. It's a space opera, but it's like the Atlas 6 in that it gets kind of thinky. I'm also really excited about The Book Eaters by Sunyi Dean, which that is summer or fall this year. It's basically a gothic like vampire sapphic horror. It's not actually vampires, but kind like basically. So yeah, that one's really interesting too. And I don't know when the sequel to oh shoot, what is it called? All of Us Villains, All of Our Demise, is that what it's called? I don't know when it's coming out, but I'm excited for that also.
Okay, this next question may be a little bit challenging, but what is a book that you would recommend to everyone?
Well, I already said If I Had Your Face by Frances Shaw. I love White Teeth by Zadie Smith. The Neapolitan novels by Elena Ferrante are just like, that'll change your life. And I already brought up Pachinko. I love Pachinko.
What is the first thing you would look up in the archives if you could?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I think that I would want to look up like conspiracy theory type things and find out. Yeah. I'm just nosy. I just want to know.
It would be fun to know.
Get the answer to all of like the true crime questions out there in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it starts there.
Okay, now moving on to, we have a final speed round. so hopefully this will be fast and fun. Tumblr or TikTok?
Sorry, TikTok, but Tumblr forever. Tumblr's so
Yeah!
good. I love it so much. I miss it. I haven't been on my Tumblr in so long because like I'm just really used to really long form answers and really taking my time, and I haven't had the time. I freaking love Tumblr.
STEM or linguistics?
I'm gonna say STEM for these purposes, but like I was not really a STEM person. I love books.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Okay. Reading or writing?
I mean, writing to stay sane, but reading to like enjoy. Like when I really feel when I'm having a good day, it's like with a good book.
Okay. College or working?
That's a weird question, right? But I I would stay in academia forever if I could. For a long time, I thought that was the only thing I was good at. I would like if they would just let me stick around and just get PhDs forever or whatever, I'd do it.
Yeah. Okay, final one, fantasy or contemporary romance?
They're just different, they're different flavors, you know, for different times. I
What's
usually,
today's mood?
yeah, I mean, I guess I would say fantasy, but I do like to blend genres a little bit, so I like a little bit of romance in there too.
Yay.
Woo! Thank you so much for joining us. We had a blast. Just honestly, I could just sit here and listen to you talk on and on even more. But thank you so much.
Promising.
Thank you everyone who read with us the Atlas 6. Make sure you pre-order the Atlas Paradox and also my Mechanical Romance, which comes out next month. Our May book of the month is Once Upon an Eid, in celebration of Eid, and we're looking forward to just reading with you guys all in the future.
Yay!
Thank you for
Thank you
having
for watching. Bye.